Check, check, yes. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our panel on recruiting resources. I'm already messing up my words. My name is Julian Owusu, and I'm from Finland, working with the National Arts Promotion Center with youth culture, and in specific with hip-hop culture. And I have an amazing set of panelists with me today, and I'll actually let them introduce themselves. We'll start off with questions and discussing the topic from different perspectives, from their perspectives also, from various institutions and where they work. But then we'll also open the floor for audience questions. So if there's anything in mind, please just write them down. The mic will reach you at some point. Okay. So, my dear panelists, please join me. So I think we should start by just a short introduction of ourselves, so the audience also knows from which perspective we're all speaking from and who we are. Okay.
You are looking at me.
I am looking at you. For some reason, this direction feels right.
Hello, everybody. My name is Iwona Preis. I work as director of Intercult in Stockholm, a small NGO on Södermalm, dealing with different subjects, among others, also the subject of diversity.
Hi, Odd Bakke. I'm a special advisor at the National Museum of Art, Architecture and Design. I'm a trained artist and I've been in the museum for like 10 years, working with touring exhibits and competence developments, and now opening a giant museum down by the harbor in 2021. So now working with diversity and recruitment.
Hello, my name is Berit Sandholdt Jacobsen, and I'm head of a library in Denmark in a town called Svendborg, about 60,000 people. I have 25 years experience as a librarian and 20 years experience with working with integration. I haven't been on all the meeting in this project, but all my experience and now head of a library. I think that's why I was asked to be here today. Mm.
Hi, my name is Elin Danielsen. I'm a trained director, but the last year I've worked as a department manager of theatre at the Cultural School in the municipality of Tromsø in the north of Norway.
My name is Ninos Josef. I'm a dancer and actor, and I also work as a consultant in organizational strategies for institutions in diversity. And I'm also one of the critical friends.
Thank you. Yes, you can applaud. Yes. So I think we should just like go straight into the topic of recruiting resources. The first thing that we have to start with is definition. What do we mean by resources? So this is going to be a general question. Do you feel we have the right resources, or what would be the right resources in terms of competence and experience in your fields? Because you have very specific fields or very different fields from each other. And I know there's no such thing as general right resources or a general approach to this. In your various fields, do you feel that there are certain specific competences and experiences that you need to look for when considering recruiting? The floor is open. Anybody can start.
Yeah.
In the
Yes.
in the library world, we have some certain skills that we are looking for. So if you're asking me, is it easy to recruit? people with a different background than Danish. No, it isn't, because they don't study as a librarian. One example now is that we are looking at very young people and trying to give them jobs at the library so they can see what a job in a library is. The public library have a high degree of credibility in the group, but it's not often that they want to work there. So that's specific if you talk about the skills.
That is very interesting, and if I may follow up, libraries are very interesting microcosms of society. When libraries are very functional, you actually see the whole span of society in those libraries. And as you said, recruiting is not simple. So do you work with other groups or other societies or associations?
Oh yeah, as I said, the libraries have a big credibility towards these groups, and they use the libraries more than Danish people. So we have a lot of projects and activities and so on, but recruiting them into the organization like evil, that's the main thing. We could be better.
Thank you.
Yeah, I might follow up, because museums aren't supposed to be like they are today, apparently. So I said definitely no, we don't have the resources to connect to the society that we want to connect to. Our staff is not mirroring or reflecting the diversity of Oslo city population, and we need to recruit, think different in spelling out what kind of competences do the museum need. Do we need more art historians, or art history, or pedagogics, or artists? All we need, or do we need some different kind of competences that can give us the ability to connect to these to this more diverse society outside the museum walls? So we don't have it.
I am a part of the Nordic Forum of Interculture, also co-organizing this conference, and we created, or we did a report on a mapping of different reports, projects, sources on diversity, on dealing with diversity, and among those sources, most of the advices, most of the methodologies were among museums. So examples from museums are often also examples from other sectors, I would say. So I'm really impressed about the museums, and I hope that you will just continue this great job, because I think that the museums have different angle looking at the audience. What are we to offer to the diversified audience, to the new audience of coming into our walls, and that audience is so much different than it has been before, and there is a need of changing. And speaking about my own organization, we are dealing a lot with international collaborations, and that is easy. I mean, people coming to us, we need project managers. We need people who are used to working internationally. We need people who speak English very good, or French or other languages, write Swedish quite good, but English is our language, which we use internationally. So in that area, there is actually no problem with finding people with those capacities. But otherwise, if I need people for communicating, disseminating in Sweden the information which we find in Europe or in other countries, then there is a difference, because now we need really good spoken and written Swedish, and this is an obstacle, language. I don't know, what do you think about it?
Yeah, it's the same with us in the cultural school. That's what we experience too. I mean, it's difficult to recruit. I think many from from other parts of the world than the Western part of the world. They feel it's a difficult task to actually send an application to us, because they know they have to speak well Norwegian. They have to communicate not only with the children, the students they are teaching, but also with the parents. And the cultural school is so much based upon trust. You know, you have to feel that you can communicate, and you are sending your child to a teacher. You want to, you know, connect with the teacher. But I have a very, because we in Tromsø, we've been part of the Kiel network in this Nordic Dialogues, one of the 8 networks. And after entering Kiel, we decided to use the research information we got to create a new project, entering a 3rd grade school with 8 and 9-year-olds kids, to meet kids who don't necessarily approach the Kulturskolen by themselves, because in Kulturskolen you have to, we know the majority of the kids are white from very strong families, and I think 70 or 80% of the kids there are girls between 10 and 12 years old from white families. So we wanted to go into a traditional grunnskole, where they have a diverse group of kids. And I brought with me Sanna. She's a writer. She came to Norway through the PEN, International PEN program. A writer and pedagogue from Syria. And she doesn't speak very well Norwegian. So I decided to go with her, and we should always be 2 people together, me or another Norwegian teacher and her, into this classroom with the kids. And the funny thing is that suddenly her not managing Norwegian became a strong resource for her, because the kids, 8 and 9 years old, they felt empathy, sympathy with her, or empathy, and they became on the same level. So when she speaks, and you know, when she guides the lesson or the workshop we are doing every Tuesday morning, they listen, they stop, and they give her their attention, because she doesn't speak very well Norwegian. So that was a new knowledge to me, because I felt that I had to be her backup partner, but it turned to be the other way around almost.
I think, I mean, we can probably talk about it. It's difficult, or that you meet some obstacles in finding within the recruitment process. But I think this actually stems from unfair allocation of resources from the beginning. I think, like, you need to really dig into what the source of the problem is. Is there an HR manager that is fully competent in finding the talent that is needed? Is there a is there an HR education that teaches you diversity recruitment, for example, at our universities? That is where we need to go first. We need to look at, like, okay, what do we teach our HR managers? By saying that we can't find it means also that we are neglecting a big part of those who actually exist, because we do exist. And I say we because I'm one of them, and I think it's a matter of stepping out of your comfort zone and your patterns in finding the different channels. And by different channel doesn't mean that you need to recruit someone to find that channel for you. And also always make sure that when you recruit, that it's not just that one person that's going to cover the diversity for your whole organization. Jesus. It's a matter of finding or making diversity a normal part of the process, recruitment process, you know, like it's very simple. I mean, I'm sure we exist in each and every field and profession there is out there. And it's just a matter of also making sure that your workplace is attractive, you know, like, I can say for myself, I already know when I'm going to audition as a dancer, I will never go and audition for a full white company. I will not, because it does not attract me, because the visible representation is so poor that it will make me feel uncomfortable already going there or sending my application. I know that the eyes that are going to look at this are going to look at it differently. And that is already, you know, it's exposing to yourself, but like quoting Kamara, it's hurtful. And you don't want to work somewhere where you get hurt or where you feel you know, so I think I think we need to start at the HR educations, making sure that diversity is a part of the schooling system in how to recruit diversity. And then once you reach your institutions, it's also making sure that that one person that you're looking for is not going to fill up the diversity, but that diversity is a natural part of the process. That once you meet a person of color in the hallway, it shouldn't be like, hi. You know, it just should be hi. Next one, hi, next one, you know?
Yes.
It's
And the responsibility for diversity is between us, like it was
Of
said this
course,
morning. It's
yes.
not you,
course.
but it's something happening between us.
Of course, it's a mutual process. I mean, like I said, it's a systematic, unfair structure that probably has led to the fact that we don't look at different institutions when we are looking for jobs, because we know they already have a stamp upon them that says that they're not diverse or that they do not welcome diversity. And I mean, we are a pretty big community, but it's also a very small community. So, you know, word spread. When one person has a bad experience, it's going to spread. And then all of a sudden, your institution is not attractive anymore.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.
But
Thank
there
you.
is only one institution. At some point, you will have to go to the opera,
Yeah.
right? And look for that job.
Been there,
so-
done that.
Yeah.
But I think that it's about, of course, it's about the management of culture, and human relations is a part of the problem. But I don't know if you can deal with the problem by educating new human relation managers. It's much more than that. Of course, I mean, set up the goals of diversity in each institution so that the work comes up from the top level down is also very important, if not crucial. That your boss is really, the head of the institution is really pushing for that management of diversity, so that it goes through all the stages. But the problem is not that you will not go to that institution to apply for the job. The problem is how will you work so that this institution will change? How will you change this institution? I mean, who is the first to change the institution? Who of you would like to go to that institution and say, please, do something?
Yes, well,
I mean, I wouldn't say it's my job to change an
exactly.
institution.
No.
That's what I
But-
was
So whose
saying.
job is it?
Yeah.
Whose job is it?
Well, it's like
Yeah.
I think it's like Iwona says, it needs to come from higher. I think we need to look at the Ministry of Culture and the Ministry of Education and make sure that the white papers and government bills literally specifies ethnic diversity, because otherwise it will allow institutions to bypass it and not actually actively work with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So at this point, I realize when we're speaking of diversity, what are we speaking about? Maybe we need some definition there also. Once again, to quote Kamara, since her performance / lecture was so great, diversity isn't carried by a person. And the fact that we're in institutions saying that they don't have some, we're othering a whole society. We're placing people who are part of the conversation, who should be part of the conversation, sort of on the other side, on the receiving end of that conversation. And especially with our institutions, which might be quite faceless, so we don't have that, even though there's a boss, you know, the boss's job is not on paper to take care of diversity. That job is someone else's job. But when it's not specified, then we're in the situation where we're looking outside for people to come into our institutions to change them. So, speaking of institutions, museums. Museums are known as strongholds of history. Museums are stereotypically very concrete, white as
Very
well. Yes, but also very, very rigid in
They are.
structure.
absolutely.
And change happens slowly. But what's interesting to me is that this history that we have in museums is very selective. But the museums are also creating our future's history. And from a curator's perspective, are there specific measures that are taken or should be taken in ensuring that future's history will mirror our present.
Sure, absolutely. I'm not a curator at the museum, so I don't have any impact on artists for the specific exhibitions. But you're absolutely right about the history of museums. It's devastating, and we are reproducing the history one year after the other. And like in 2017 was the 100th anniversary for the Sami Parliament, was a wake-up call for like my museum, the National Museum, and probably many more museums around Norway as well, because there was a sudden, you'd say, a productive guilt. What Yamara Juf says, there was a productive guilt feeling that made us look at our acquisitions for the collection and the terrible history of fornorskning, of norsifying the Sápmi. And the actual action since 2017 has been remarkable in our museum, in the National Museum, with acquisitions and focus on Sami-based art, architecture, doji, design and handicrafts as well. So there is a movement, and why not can guilt be productive? It is productive if you make it productive.
Yeah. So in that productivity, can you name some strategic measures that the museum has taken forward? Also being interesting because others can learn from them.
Yeah. Well, let's see the reopening in 2021 spring, and there's a collection. There's a big collection exhibit, like 6,000 works of art, all as versatile as it is. But there's also an opening exhibition in the light hall on top of the museum, which is curated in a very different way than before, which is quite radical when it comes to museums, because the only one allowed to apply to be in that opening show at the new National Museum were artists that are not represented in the collection. That is quite radical and created quite a buzz around the art world in Norway. And also there is a algorithm that has been created to select how artists are going to work together or be displayed together in the opening show. So here the curators have actually given up their position of power, both to the result of choosing someone, then you lock something out, and now opening for that what is locked out side, and now of course then excluding the ones that already are represented in our collection. So they will, but there. So there's quite a radical thinking to that opening exhibition when it comes to content and artists actually.
That sounds all very interesting. I find honestly very interesting.
But does it matter?
Very interesting
It's a
concrete
museum.
measures. I find very often, also working from within an institution, that very often diversity measures and they become projects.
Yes.
So we have this.
Yes.
We're going to do this for 2 years, and then what after that?
Yeah.
So, Iwona, you have worked for 20 years with these matters.
Don't say it.
So, do you see any form of like longer arc to the conversation, or do you also experience it to be project to project to project?
Well, I work I lead a project-based organization, so I have nothing against projects to start with, because the projects create a free platform for an opportunity for ideas, for expressing your wishes, for innovation, which is a very famous word nowadays, but it really is. So as long as the project exists, and even if it closes, you can open a new one or apply for a new one. So you can actually do projects in many years, and it's like leading an organization also. So I have nothing against projects, but of course, not everything should be project-based. Policies must be existing. Politicians must also have a heart for certain subjects, and that that is the bridge. I started to work with I am a migrant myself, first generation, and I also, even if I am not like looking especially migrant-wise when I don't open my mouth, I was also going through all those applications, not getting jobs and so on. And I have this experience, and I know that I must find my own space, my own free space, to express my own feelings, my own wishes in the working life. So those are the projects or the organizations when I work with. But of course, I am looking at what's going on in the outside world, and what's going especially on in the politics, because this is very important for publicly funded institutions, cultural institutions. They got the letters, they got the rules, and who is brave enough to listen or not to listen to what's going on in the politics. In 2005, I was working at the Länsstyrelsen in Stockholm. This is the National Administrative Board of Stockholm, I think, with a platform called Platform for Immigrants in the Region of Stockholm. And the meaning was to create an agreement with all the municipalities, organizations, unions, and so on integration, migrant integration in the region. Diversity was also included. And the project was financed by European Social Fund, and it was ongoing in 2 years, and then it was suddenly closed. It was closed very close to the elections. And nobody knew, in fact, why. But this was exactly the year when the elections took place. And during that period of 1 year, nobody wanted to work with integration anymore. So politics are so important. And then slowly it came back again. And now we are here speaking about diversity because we have new challenges and the second generation coming very strongly. But look at the politics. What happens? Social Democrats in Sweden, in Europe, all the right-wing movements which are taking the diversity from our tables, from our minds, trying to take away books from the libraries or performances from the theaters. What's going on in the politics? This is more important, to influence the power.
Yes.
I think, I mean, what you're saying is very true. We are existing in a very polarized society between right wing and left wings, and we are told to fear the embracing of the culture from the right wing area of the political sphere. But I sometimes ask myself, and I try to ask my colleagues, who do you actually fear the most? The person who openly despises your existence, or the one that actually claims to embrace it while excluding you? Because what happens is that the cultural field is actually permeated by left wing, or the majority of people are more to the left side of the political sphere, and yet it is one of the most exclusive and excluding sectors in our society. So it's a bit of a
Contradiction.
yeah, it's a very big contradiction there.
Absolutely, politics are important, but I mean, the museum, the libraries, the cultural schools, we know. We don't need, we're big enough to act on this knowledge that we already have. We don't need policies to recruit different, to change the way we think. What we know is more than enough. We don't need another white paper, actually. Let's have some action.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
speaking
very true.
about recruiting, it's free.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it's free.
In
So we
my
are
mu-
back
yeah,
to
yeah.
basics.
We just have to, when there's a job available at the National Museum, our team of diversity and inclusion, we constantly have to remind the HR section that have to rewrite competences. Because unions and staff itself will always look for replicants of themselves. So we have to remember, we have to change how what is the name of the qualifications we need. We need to change that rhetorics. We do it every time we apply for some people, you know.
Or perhaps not even name it, but also be open towards new kind of qualifications. Because
Yes.
I think what happens in the Nordic arts field a lot of the time is that we think that the Nordic arts field, both in the education sector and but also that is very universal,
Yeah.
you know, when it's really not. And I think what happens is that we need to open up for criterias, you know, we need to open up the criterias for new genres, new experiences, new education systems, and make sure that we validate them and that we professionalize them just as much as we do in our own schooling system in the Nordic. That if I come from an education, whether it's in the Middle East or somewhere else, that should weigh just as high as any other education in the Nordics.
Absolutely, exactly. So instead of asking for art history masters, you know, and experience 2 years from museum, we ask for any kind of education with a different network, different perspectives, different languages than we already have in our institution. That's the way to reach greater diversity.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I agree in the project and in education. Time is positive for us. I use the FN goals to speak about globalization, about equally and such. If we take it the next level, instead of talking about them and us and making projects so I can help you, but just take what has been best in the project and use best practice and talk about globalization instead. Use that term.
Yes, I'm quite interested in this changing of competences, of what is actually competence. Are there some kind of intercultural competences? Are there competences that go beyond, for example, our education system? Are there things that we need in our workplace that we don't get from our education system? How can they be measured? How can they be weighed? You said you gave us an example of a teacher who didn't have strong Norwegian language, but was able to do her job exceptionally, which means that is not necessarily the lack of language, but it's another competence that she has. Do you, in your position or in your what's it called, the association, do you seek to define those competences? What are the other things that you need when recruiting?
Yeah, we do. I'm quite new in my job. I came in last year, and came directly into the Kiel project. And I have to say that my background is from political theater and Wahl's methods. So this is kind of my baby thematically. So we actually we wanted to use the Kiel network to develop a new knowledge in our cultural school in Tromsø. And also being part of, the Kiel network and the Nordic Dialogues, it has given us what is the English word for mandat? Mandate. So it gave us a very strong mandate also towards the school owner, which is the municipality of Tromsø. So it's kind of being part of all this has given us a great opportunity. It's a door opener to be able to speak up towards the politicians as well and the owners of the cultural school. And we've been followed by researchers from all over from all the Nordic countries, and we see that the same problems are in Norway as in the rest of the Nordic countries. So we have already in the Kiel project found some keys that we can use to open up and develop actually a totally new cultural school. We have to go away from the expecting people to come to our building to pay 2,000 kroner for 6 months or for 4 months of education. That's 4,000 a year. I mean, if you have 3 kids and maybe you live on one salary, it's impossible to expect that people can come and actually take part in the Norwegian cultural school as it is today. So we've learned some keys that we think we can use. We are testing them out now. When it comes to the example I gave you earlier with Sanna Aun, check her out. She's a brilliant author and dramatic or drama educator. We have used her in many different ways, not only as a teacher, but also to produce new plays for our kids. So she brings in her culture from Syria and teaches us also through arts. Through her art form, she teaches us something about her background. So not only as a teacher, but as an artist as well. Because art speaks to us in a totally different manner. But I have to say, it takes a lot, you have to be prepared. It's not an easy task to engage in someone who doesn't speak Norwegian. And you have to be, and it's not easy for Sanna either. I mean, we have been so angry with each other. I am impatient. I want her to do stuff, and she's impatient with me because she wants more time. But if both of us are able to open up a bit and to laugh when we get, when we discuss, I think it's easier to actually be willing to give in that extra from her side and from my side, and then in the end, we receive so much more for the kids we are working with.
On a personal level, yes, that is very true. But the whole structure of the organizations where we work don't necessarily play by that logic. They are not fluid enough to be able to accommodate difference.
Well, in my working space, we have, because I can show that she is doing a great job, and she can show it, and she is given the space to speak up for herself. So at least we, in the Cultural School in Tromsø, I feel that they are listening to her and to us. They see that they want us to be a modern cultural school for everyone, not only for the rich white people. To put it
That's
in
good.
an easy, yeah.
However, is this situation dependent on your personal role working with her? If for some reason you're out of the equation, what would happen to her? Just a question.
I don't know, because I haven't tested it, because I'm kind of giving her competence also to my colleagues, and they experience the same thing. And I think what we have to do is I can't be kind of her guide. I want her to guide. I want her to be. So I have to give her that space, and I have to. My colleagues, they have to give her her space and treat her like a colleague. Treat her as the very intelligent and brilliant teacher and artist she is. And we all kind of have to be a subject in our own lives and not take the role of a suppressor and oppressor.
Yes, thank you.
So basically, Sanna carries the diversity in this organization.
Or I
would
do
say.
too when we work together.
Of course, yeah. But I think what one needs to do is you need to look at the structure. I mean, once again, clearly she brings a new audience to the cultural school, which makes the majority of people, would make anyone happy, because it also generates in a financial cycle, all of these kind of benefits. But we need to start already not depending that process on her or anyone else of color. We need to depend that on our structure of a cultural school. Is that, do we allow everyone to participate on equal level? If I would go as a 7-year-old kid to a cultural school with the oud, does anyone here know what a oud is? It's an Arabic instrument, kind of like a guitar with like an oval thing. If I would knock on the door of a cultural school with an oud, they would close the door at me, So it's about, what do we offer? Who do we welcome? Do we see this as an obstacle if a kid would come in with an instrument that we do not recognize as cultural capital? Or do we actually go in and be like, okay, we have a kid who's interested, who might have a brilliant future as an artist. What do we do? How do we do it from here without depending it on this person or anyone external? What do we need to change within the structure to make sure that this kid can participate on equal level regardless? And I think that is the problem. We need to be open. The cultural schools in general in the Nordic, they need to be open up. They need to open up for genres. They need to professionalize, make sure that they also, because what happens is that the cultural school, if we only educate children in Western art forms, the art field would only be predominantly Western art forms. You know, it's a cultural cycle. And it starts at the first your first intersection with arts, which is most of the time the arts and cultural schools or other cultural organization. And if the doors are closed already there, we've already killed the whole process, you know. And I think instead of making sure that Sanna is the one who's bringing in the diversity, or you together with Sanna, why isn't there anything within the organization already stating that this should be a part of the process?
Yeah, and this is lacking. And when it's lacking, you need. We see it all the time. It has to come from the group of people outside of the institution.
Yeah.
Because it's not an easy task to open up, and it can be very difficult to change old institutions.
Because there are gatekeepers.
Because there are gatekeepers. Yeah.
Just to continue on the subject, the first step, as you said. I know for example, in Finland, in many libraries, libraries have changed by nature a lot. They're no longer places where you only go to read books. But for example, there are in Finland, in some libraries, you can borrow season tickets to games. You can borrow tickets to concerts and stuff like that. In doing such expansions and renewals of the system itself, are there diversity targets in place?
Yes.
Can you elaborate on them? On what side?
Yeah, we have the best practice has been lessons to homework. The word is. We have had a lot of projects for children and older people, and today I get a little provoked when you say for the music school, when a boys come with now I know the sitar, the guitar, the sitar, but someone has to take the first step. Is it the music school who says now we are teaching, and there's nobody wants it, or is it the boy who break
the school?
The door?
Okay,
But
taxpayers' money. It's the schools.
If I may just interject in this.
No, but it's just both
in this
way.
situation, yes,
it's
but
both way.
I
Because
understand, but if I may just say something,
it's
this is where recruiting. This is where this topic comes into question.
Yeah, but it's back
because
to
the music school has to recruit a teacher. Because I could not place an application to some random school saying that, hey, I know how to play this instrument you've never heard of. Pay me. It doesn't work like that.
But it's just to say that in the libraries people come to us.
Yes.
Yes, and we embrace it, even though we may not have the knowledge. We didn't have it 20 years ago, but we started and we had the dialogue. So they came, and we embraced it.
And that's why I find the library very interesting.
So
and they
it's
work
just to say
structurally.
we have to give on.
Yeah, I think also in Finland is because in Finland they don't have the same structure of arts and cultural schools as the rest of the Nordic. They don't have Kulturskolan in the same way. So I refer to Kulturskolan, which you have in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, but you don't actually have it in Finland. They have different organizations. So I also understand that you get a bit provoked, but.
No,
but also, I mean,
we have to do
and
it
also
together.
the structures of
Kulturskolan
Kulturskolan and libraries are different.
Yeah.
So there are things that you might be doing right in your network that the culture school can learn from.
Yeah.
So is there this exchange of practices?
Of course, that this is about recruiting. It's so obvious that if you recruit right people to the management of the organization or institution, then the diversity will grow exponentially because people are looking for people to recruit in their surroundings, in their where they grew up. Also, friends, networks. This is a very well-known situation, and those people are also influencing the audience, as you said, setting up a program which also includes parts which are created for special groups. minority groups or, I don't know, other groups in the society. So recruiting influences everything. But also education, which you mentioned. I've met the other day, I was in Södertälje, one of the migrant dense suburbs in Stockholm, and I've met two organizations. And one of them was supported by Creative Places, the beautiful project which the Swedish Arts Council set up, Livet Beach. I don't know if you've heard about it. They are two girls educating a group of girls living in Södertälje, teenagers with diverse migrant backgrounds. And this is not about the theater in itself. It's about the empowerment of those girls, which hopefully will proceed to the theater education or to the cultural sector. We don't know if they will, but the interest is opened. The interest is being built up in this group. And another organization, how is the name? Storytellers, I think. But not the storytellers from Södertälje. They are reading books for children, and they are setting up theaters with children. They are giving away books, 1,300 books this year. Several hundred children coming. All the children are with migrant backgrounds. They are reading and setting up Pippi Longstrump and other Swedish classics because they want it. And what will happen to those children? They will hopefully proceed to the cultural school. Which will open the doors because they are invading. We need that invasion of children, of young people who really want to proceed to the education in culture to change the sector. Otherwise, we will not have any change. How would that look like? That I step aside, okay, you will step aside, but that's not enough.
Okay, we've been speaking for about 45 minutes. I'd like to take some questions from the audience.
Yes.
Can I just
Please comment.
give a comment on that?
Larry.
I think also one thing one needs to. I mean, I know both Livet Beach and the Storyteller, and they are also working with art forms that are Western recognized, and I think that will already give them a benefit, or these children a benefit. I mean, I myself am trained in a Western style of dance, and if I compare myself to someone who is trained in any other Caribbean dance style or Afro dance style or hip hop even, my journey is a lot easier than theirs, you know. And I think that also has to do because the field itself does not recruit or open up for non-Western genres. And if it's like these kind of organizations, they're great because they already implement a seed that will have this wave effect on the field, but the wave effect will not necessarily change much more than the actual representation. You know, the field will still stay the same unless we open it up for more experiences, expressions, and genres, and make sure to professionalize these on the same level as the Western genres that we are recognizing, you know?
Yes, thank you. There was a question here, or a comment. Can you please introduce yourself so we know who's speaking?
Sure. My name is Lara Sanna, and I'm a curator and museologist. I'm coming from Italy, and currently I'm working as a visual art teacher in an international school.
Thank you.
And in Sweden, yes, sorry, in Sweden, and I felt like very. It was a sort of provocation because hearing your voices very respectful, but it sounds that as long as we are talking about we and them, as long as we are talking about groups, we have arranged these for different groups. I mean, minority groups of people groups with, we can keep identifying the rest of the world in groups. And as long as we are doing this, we are not going anywhere. I've recently worked in a research in museology about inclusion. It was something a little bit different. It was about inclusion of visually impairment people, but at the ground, it's really the same. We are still keeping thinking when we organize, any kind of thing that it's done for an audience. We are not thinking about everybody. We are thinking in terms of group. So since we are not ready to think in inclusion in this way, but just in adaptations, we are not moving anywhere. This was my personal point of view. Thank you.
Thank you. Would someone like to comment that? Or
I can comment. I agree and I disagree. I mean, we have this discussion in Sweden where they're also saying by talking about race, inclusivity or diversity will not happen. I think if you do not speak about race, it will never happen. I believe that we don't necessarily need to divide people in groups, but we need to acknowledge that the fact that they are different groups. And I think we can speak about everybody in terms in like terminology, but not everybody is oppressed in the same way and face the same kind of structural problems when it comes to the art sector. So, and if we do not divide groups and make sure that these groups get support from underneath, then we will not end up on an equal level. And I think we really need to talk about groups, but we also need to make sure, like you say, we need to be aware of the terminology that we use. We need to also make sure that when we're talking about groups, not to place ourselves with them and us, but include us all in the conversation, but then maybe address the bigger, because I think there's a problem by not acknowledging the fact that we do have differences. We will also erase a lot or miss a lot of the structural problems that a lot of people face from minority groups, unfortunately.
And the base of this is also in defining norms.
Yeah.
So if we don't know what we all assume to be us and don't define that, then we get stuck in that us and them discussion.
Yeah.
Also because there's also people rarely fit into one box. Now we've been speaking a lot about migrants and people of other languages. What about racialized Norwegians? What about... Exactly. So where is that discussion? And that discussion also gets lost when we sort of skip. There were a few questions that someone has a mic up there, so we can take that.
My name is Kristin Ørjasæter. I am the director of the Norwegian Institute for Children's Books. And this question that you are discussing is really important for us. To make children's literature a literature where every child in Norway feel that they belong, that is a huge topic that we have to deal with immediately. As a director of the institute that runs a school for authors, I fail in my job to recruit teachers of that can inspire the authors to be. And I'm really thinking, how can I do a better job? How can I solve this question? And I'm sorry to say, this discussion makes me feel that the question is wrong. You are discussing the wrong topic. You have to ask, for whom do we write children's literature? For whom do you run the museum, the library, for instance? As long as I am looking for teachers with a certain competence, with a PhD in Norwegian literature, I will not be able to make the future of Norwegian literature, a literature for everyone. So I really want us to ask another question, not how do we get the, well, we have to ask questions that make us not think in dichotomy terms. We cannot think, how can we include people? We have to ask, who am I serving?
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. Yeah. Please. Okay, go ahead. Comment. No, Per, if you had a comment.
Yeah,
to that,
sure.
you
But
could.
I absolutely agree. Museums, we know who museums are for, and we constantly work really hard to reach all those new groups of people that don't come to the museum. But there is no way we can reach those people without changing ourselves. It's not about audience development, which constantly is an action in the museum, but it's about museum development. We have to change the way our perspectives and our language and our networks constantly is a wall around us. We constantly make the same exhibition for the same audiences. We need to change ourselves. We need to change the staff. So it has to start also with looking at ourselves and how we constitute our resources and competences. Both things.
Yes. A lot of things can happen at the same time and need to be
Yes.
addressed at the same time. Please go ahead.
Okay, as Mani Gusta, I work as a curator in museum education at the Halva Museum in Stockholm. And I think I almost have the same question as the earlier one, just another perspective. And I'm asking you as a organization then, for every person, how are you hurting by not having diversity? Are you actually hurting? Because if you are, you would actually have a plan to get that away. Because I work in a public museum and I notice that directly. For example, school is important. So we notice directly, oh, the last 3 months we have less school classes coming. Why? We panic. We put resources and time to evaluate and then to make that not happen anymore for every different subject. But when it comes to this, it's always voluntary. And I hear that when you're speaking as well. Hopefully, we will get this from this. We would try. It's voluntary. So, is it voluntary for you? If it's not, in what way are you working?
Juicy.
But you know, you are really speaking about audience development. When I say this, when we use this terminology, it doesn't mean that you work with people out there, or I don't know, incorporating people out there. What you are doing with working with audience development is that you are working with your own institution or organization, looking for people around you and trying to get them into into the institution as either your employees or your audience. And this is the work, and this is the competence which is needed in the organization to know who you are working with. Why those classes? Why did they disappear? Because you were not working with your audience. So this is the target. That this is the tool. Who is your? We are working with culture. Who is our audience? At the theaters, at the schools, at the institutions, at the cultural school. This is the audience. Who is looking at what we are doing?
And yes, I agree. And no matter how well we try to look, we all have blank spots because of this society we grow in. We grow to see certain things and not see certain things. That is why we have to, as institutions, be ready to accept the fact that we do not know. We need to learn, and we need people to teach us.
Yeah.
Not for free, not from their own personal need or incentive, but we need to pay them, we need to hire them, recruit them. So this is where we talk about.
So we need money.
Yes, so we need money.
No.
I mean, the money is there.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
just
It's just
I
it's
agree.
just not
allocated.
allocated.
Just
It's
to
just
comment
not allocated
that
fairly.
where are we hurting question also, I'd like to also ask you that, do the networks and organizations you represent have any financial incentive? Do you get any kind of punishment or money taken away if you do not work to your diversity quota or your aims that you yourself have placed?
No consequences for us.
No.
Doesn't hurt enough.
Yeah.
Doesn't hurt enough.
I can take talking about.
Mm.
May we? We don't.
No,
but
no,
is it
we don't
okay to have?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
Yeah.
I don't need.
So
quota.
are
I
there
just
there
employ.
aims specific? Do you
Yes.
have specific aims in your organizations?
We do.
You do.
Yeah, we do. And that's why the cultural school, the main thing we have to do is leave our own building and go out there where the kids are because they have to. And that's in the kindergarten and in the school and in SFO, skolefritidsordning. So, and the government has also said that the cultural school, we have to cooperate with the traditional school system in Norway. So we are out there. We are starting slowly by slowly, but that's the new way of organizing the Kulturskole. We can't expect people to come. We have to be out there meeting people, talking to kids and the parents, and create totally new forum for us to meet each other. Okay. And I think also we have to go away a bit from the notion that I, as a director and teacher, am going to teach you something, because the child, from wherever you come from, you can also teach me and teach the group. And together we create art. So theater is an amazing art form because it is a dialogue all the way through it. There is a dialogue. And raising, especially the kids who don't speak up for themselves, learning or giving them the opportunity to speak up. That's what you can do when you enter the school system and the kindergarten system. Out of the building. Out into the streets.
Yeah, thank you. There's the mic over there.
Hey, yeah, my name is Metro Rabela. I'm the director of Tandau. I have so many questions. The first one is that all of you, I'm a migrant and I learn Norwegian and I'm art historian, and I don't understand why you have to. You said that the National Museum said that you are. Maybe you're not going to look for art historians or for curators or who are migrants. Why not? I have a good education. It's not Norwegian, but it's good. The other one is this. Now, the other one is this. You're all talking about language like a barrier. It's maybe 2 generations of diaspora Norwegians who speak Norwegian. They don't know why. They're diaspora. The Filipinos, they're Somalis, they're from Latinos. Like, why are you talking about language? Like, Sanna is the teacher who is coming and she doesn't speak Norwegian. I'm sure that Mohammed speaks Norwegian fluently because he's the 2nd generation. What is this? And I have another one, sorry. Oh, yes. You don't have quotas or incentives, or they take your money out for hiring diversity. You get incentive with money to hire diversity, because I was, how is the name? Aspirant. And you get money for somebody with really good education. And you just get it, and some of you use it as a cheap labor, and then you don't get more possibilities. You get one line in your CV, and you don't get any more from that. So that was all my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Stefan, can I also direct the mic to this side afterwards? Here. Thank you.
So I'll try to be quick, answering in short order. Can the following people raise your hand or stand up? Daisy, Shanti, Sese, Nosiswe, Mariama, Maria, Teresa, Samsaya. Okay, so the person who mentioned children's book, we will read and we will buy the children's book that you write with these people. All the people that are standing up there are more than competent to write it. They are very, very inspirational teachers who will inspire the next generations of children's books writers. They already are. Solved your problem. Next. Then, there was a question of whether you should have a quota for diversity or not. We need to acknowledge that you already have a quota and that we are being quotated out. There are multiple issues in the arts sector that we are the best to answer. But we're not hired to answer it. You would rather hire somebody who will spend 2 years learning the field, to spend 6 months summarizing the little bit of learning that they glean, having salaries that have then wasted about 1.5 million kroners, when somebody could have come in and started the work tomorrow because they already have the competence. That is quotation. Then, somebody mentioned that we have to do the work together. Then my question is, if you own the building, control the resources, set the agenda, and decide how available you are, under those premises, what does together mean? And lastly, when it comes to the issue of someone who's been spoken on behalf of, I wanted to acknowledge the problematics of actually having somebody here who we have to acknowledge is completely at somebody else's mercy, to the degree that she's even being defined, her competence is being defined, and her experience is being defined without her being here in the room to represent herself. That is part of the issue and the problem in this entire sector, because we are constantly being spoken for rather than spoken with, or just handed the mic. And we can facilitate a translator if she wanted a place in the table or was asked to come to the table. That was it.
I see.
Anyone?
May I just one thing? My name is Ilaria Tucci. I come from Finland. I'm one of the diversity agents coming from Helsinki. I have just one question. What is your fear? Because I think we need to explore our fears, face them, and finally take action. Thank you.
Stefan, there's been a question here for a very long time.
Yeah, are we gonna answer?
Yes, please do, while the mic is
Can
on the way.
I answer on
Please
behalf
answer.
of my colleague, first of all? She could not be here, but she has been with me in other conferences, and she knows that the project we are developing together, that she is the leader of, this project will be spoken of also when she is not together with me in the room. But if she could have been here, she'd love to be here.
I want to fill in on the part of the quotation. I do not believe in quotation. I believe in mirroring the society should be the quotation. There should not be a 2 out of 10. There should be a percentage that mirrors the society. And that's when we would be happy. And also mirroring the society, I don't mean, because we need to be very careful when we speak about foreign backgrounds, migrants or whatever. I use foreign backgrounds, but foreign background in Sweden, for example, according to Statistiska centralbyrån, means anyone outside of Sweden. So that means if you are Norwegian, immigrating or migrating to Sweden, Norwegian migrating to Sweden, you are considered having a foreign background, which means that if you get employed, statistically, it looks like the institution is working with diversity or you know. And I think we need to be very careful because research from Kulturanalys Norden shows that actually the diversity that happens in the arts field is permitted by white and Western labor or force or expressions or artists, etc. And I think that is what we also need to talk about, like the representation of melanin, because that is what is important. Like otherwise it also doesn't work in because there's also a very big difference between working internationally or with internationalism and interculturalism. And that's also something that institutions need to be very defined in.
Well, we have reached quite a distance when it comes to gender equality through quotas in the Nordic countries, and I think we could achieve the same thing for diversity with quotas as well. But it is difficult the rhetorics of quoting is
But
really
I think
difficult.
just by saying that my institution should mirror the society already is a quotation system, you know? Because if you look at the statistic in Sweden, 25.3% of the population has foreign background, whereas out of these 25%, 70% have foreign backgrounds from Africa, Asia, or South and Latin America, which means that if my institution has 50% of diversity, but we have no single person of color, that does not mean that we are working with interculturalism. That means we are working with internationalism, and we are only recruiting within the Western sphere.
So, but my question here is, who are we talking about? Are we talking about NGOs? No. We are talking about publicly funded cultural institutions like museums, like operas, like theaters, libraries, and who is appointing the boards of directors of those big institutions? It's the Ministry of Culture in most cases. So where are we? We are back to to politics again. I'm sorry, because I mean you have been appointed just now to the board of
the National Art Grants Committee.
National Arts Council. I mean, isn't it easy to tell to the Ministry of Culture that 20% should be appointed in this way?
It is very easy. We can touch the subject of the politics. I mean, it's very easy for me to sit in a room with colleagues, and actually that's also what I do. They have a board meeting today, and say that we need to work for a more diverse arts field, and you know, I can stand there and give strategies and implementations. But the problem in Sweden, for example, and I think this is very general for the Nordics, is that we're talking about arm-length distance. You know, how the political sphere should not go in and control what's going on in the art field. But that's where we need to also acknowledge that diversity is not going in with arm-length distance. It's actually a human right. Like being a part of society is a democratic right. It is not, and I think. I also think we can blame politicians, but we also need to go a bit further and actually blame people in power. You know, artistic directors, bosses of whether it's NGOs or whether it's publicly funded institutions. If you are sitting on a position of power, you should be blamed.
And very many NGOs work with public funding, and work with funding, and they also fill certain quotas, so to say, in assumption that, okay, these people do work with diversity, so then the quota is filled. And if the NGOs are not held accountable as well, then there's a gap.
Hi, I'm Berit. I'm also part of Digital Friends. I have a few comments, opinions based on my experience on this field. One was, I think it was you, Berit, who was saying that you say we don't need these white papers, we don't need these things, we know. Well, I think we need it because it's not working. And also I think it's important not only when we are talking of recruiting, not only talk about the possibilities of this recruiting, but how, what entitles, like these people that we are wishing to recruit, or what are their chances to make a mark in the structure, to change the structure where they are going to be placed. I think that is a very important thing to take into account, and I think that this needs to be on paper too, because it's a change of the structure. We cannot wait that adding someone to the mix, things will be magically solved. It is not going to happen. And the second thing was also, I have here quite often these things that on recruiting, that there is no budget, there is no, well, okay. I think that there is budget, it's just how it is allocated. And I also think that it's important when we are referring to the competences, the expertise or the skills that we want in these new people that we want to recruit, also to see if our staff have it. And if it doesn't have it, how are they going to get it? Like if we talk about informatic, like programs and all these things, we are quite used that everyone is updating themselves. We have trainings, we have workshops, we have all these things. But once again, like if the people who is going to be working in the structure with these new people doesn't have a proper training or knowledge of these issues, in which kind of environment are we placing these people? So yeah, that is like
Thank you.
my comment.
Yeah. I'd like to pass the mic, Stefan, to your right there, because that question has been waiting.
Oh my God, yes. My name is Sansaya Somta Sharma. I'm a singer, songwriter, composer. And I was just thinking, first I had a question when I was over there, and then I started thinking, okay, they won't have time to answer it. So let me just go through, because I think we all are like works of art, like ourselves, just sitting here, right? So we're going through this process, and I'm going through this process that all of this tension, like Kamara mentioned earlier, I was literally crying on that, and I'm still shaking in my hand, and usually I'm very used to using a mic, so I don't usually shake like that. So I'm just going to say the point. So what I did from my corner in the world is that, okay, so I'm a singer-songwriter and a composer. So I went to the organization who deals with us, is our organization, that's Nordba in Norway. And I started to think about, why didn't I get into that organization? So for many years I had the ability to, because I was earning enough money as an artist, never thought about them, never applied any of their funds, stipends. Why didn't I do it? Because I was seeing all my other artist colleagues, they were doing it, but I wasn't doing it. Okay, so I went to them, and they were, what was really good about them was one thing, they wanted to hear my perspective. That was really great. They said, okay, come in, because we wonder, we tried to recruit you, but you didn't notice us, you know, why didn't you do that? And we had a conversation, and then they said, come to the next meeting. That was great, and then I started venting about all the emotions I had about why I had other talented friends that weren't into the system, that system, were still working their ass off and, you know, getting somewhere with their art. But so what they did, they said, look, Sansaya, you can become a Tillitsvalgt, what is that? That's
Member of the board.
Union representative.
see, there's the thing, vara. So you can be, you kind of, you're there and you get to be a part of the, some of the,
Trustee.
yeah, but you're a member, so you're like in the organization, but you're not in the board. You're not really in the board. But okay, stay with me. So I get to be a vara, and then they said, and I was talking a lot about diversity because that hurt the most. You know, it was so emotional. And somebody listened to me, and I started using words racist because it was racist. A lot of the things were just racist. Couldn't find another word for it. And then they said, look, why don't you work with diversity? Here, you go on. You become the diversity leader of Nordba, which was like, I'm like, hey, that's great. That's beautiful. Then I went home and started thinking about that. What does that mean? What type of education do I have in that, you know, in that sense? Okay, fine. Then I started thinking, well, one way I do, because I know how it feels. I felt it on my skin. I know the things I've been talking about, right? So I know this. But how do I really turn into something? Because, you know, I've been doing this for so long. Like, I think like 20 years I've been a part of these conferences, come to things, nothing really happens. So I need to make sure this really does happen. What do? Well, I went back and I said, look, I want to ensure that something happens, right? So I just started I think we started early this year with this work. And I said, I want education. I want a diversity management education in this. I'm going to look to the field. I'm going to find out, because it can't be in the world right now that there's no education in this field. And here's the thing, none of the board members knew anything more than me. Basically, they didn't have that education. So I went out finding, where do I get that education? Then I said, look, fund the education. But here's the thing, I'm not only going to do it, I want one other leader from this organization that doesn't know how it feels on the skin to join this education. So we just did that. You're looking at one of the first diversity managers in the world, actually, because it is an education. I took it this year, passed the exam. And this is not just, it's not saying that, hey, I did it. I feel like we as Nordba did it. The board did it. Why? They believed in my frustration, in my pain. They were hurting too, because they knew that if they didn't change this, if they didn't want this, in the end, a lot of good artists wouldn't come to them. That was happening. That's where they recognized the hurt. So they're taking that serious. So my question back to you, which I wanted to ask earlier before this rant, is what type of education are you currently taking to ensure that this hurt does not continue?
Thank you. We are running out of time or actually have run out of time already. This discussion is so great. Since you got a direct question, I'd like to give you time to answer. Please be brief. And this discussion can and please do continue it in the labs, because there is where we get to leave a mark. So if you have some comments that you didn't get to say out loud now, please take a cup of coffee, go to the lab, write them down, record them. The discussion doesn't end here.
And hang it
So
on the tree.
quick comments on the questions we've received, please.
No, I'll just say that I hear all that you're saying, and I think that we who are sitting here is doing whatever we can and have done it for many, many years. But it has been like a shooting. But back to the education, I started by saying the FN goals, maybe something we could work with. And right now, me and 3 other employees are taking education in these goals. Also, so we can use it as a political tools, so we can start and using this subject too to talk about the goals. So that was a way of doing it.
Thank you.
We've also been looking at the diversity management programs at CIMA, for our staff as well, and some of the leaders. Of course.
You guys are going to meet afterwards and have a discussion,
yeah.
right? Good.
Yes, we went through this education already in 2015, and there is actually a tool for self-assessment if you want to use it and take a look. Self-assessment of the level of diversity in the organization. The name of the page is from 2015, so take it for what it is. It's brokering migrants' cultural participation, but the tool is about diversity on the different levels of organization. You can just pick it up, adjust it to your organization, and run it.
Thank you. Do you have any comments?
I would say life is my education in this matter, my experiences, but also I must say I learn immensely a lot by just surrounding myself with other Black, Indigenous, and people of color, because in the spectrum of colorism, I'm also very often white passing in if I compare myself to a lot of the others. So I learn very much from you guys. I would say that's the education. I have some degrees, of course, from university, but not in diversity, no.
I'm like you, and I just hope that we can still continue the discussion afterwards, because we learn from each other all the way, and all these blind spots needs to be filled. So, yeah.
Just I have one more comment. It's obvious that diversity in institutions are individually driven. It's by people who burn for it. So we have to do work to reverse that burden of proof up to the management.
Welcome to the lab now.
Yes, please.
Let's just a quick comment. I think everybody in here can do something from their position. Always go back to yourself. The position, this chair, what can I do? Am I in charge of any recruitment? Am I charging of any programming, any curation? Am I in charge of any education? What can I do to ensure? And I think that goes especially for people who are not marginalized. What can I do from my chair? Because a lot of people say, I have no power. You have direct power for sure. If you are sitting at an office, you for sure have a task where you have some kind of power to make a difference. And just take it.
Thank you very much. This is a conversation that is ongoing. Diversity is not something in recruitment that we can just tick done. It's alive. It changes. It's an ongoing conversation, and as soon as whenever we stop having that conversation, we take steps back. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Fairooz Tamimi. I'm an author and I'm a consultant. I moved to Sweden 6 years ago from Jordan as a sad consequence of the Arab Spring. Today we will be talking about policy making, about sustainable diversity policies, and we will talk for 1.5 hours almost. I will start with the panelists, but then I would love to hear from you, and I hope we will have a vibrant Q&A session as the panel before. So I will start by inviting my guests to join me on stage in groups so that we can focus. I would like to invite Dr. Michelle Tisdel to join me. And I will start reading your bio. Michelle holds a doctorate in social anthropology from Harvard, and she works as a research librarian at the National Library of Norway. She is responsible for topics of migration, Norwegian American, and diversity. And she is a board member of museums in Akershus and a board member of the Norwegian Museum of Cultural History. She worked as a curator at the Museum of Cultural History in Oslo, and she was a member of Cultural Protection Committee in the Cultural Council. She's born in Texas, and she lived in Norway since late 90s. Welcome, Michelle. And I would like to invite Niels Righolt. Yeah, he can. And Niels is the CEO at the Danish Center for Arts and Interculture, CKI. He is a board member of Culture Action Europe. It's a major European network of cultural networks and organizations and artists and policymakers. Yes, please. And Niels also is, he has a background in literature, modern culture, and cultural communication from the University of Copenhagen. He has a broad background and experience for more than 25 years in the arts field. He worked as a managing and artistic director of the Dunkers Arts Center in Sweden, and he was a co-founder of the Intercultural magazine and communication bureau Cultures. Welcome, Niels. And finally, I would like to invite Dr. Ruth Montgomery-Andersen. And Dr. Ruth is the principal and artistic director of the National Acting School of Greenland. She's helping to build the National Theatre School in Greenland, and she also started the first dance school there. She holds a doctoral degree with a cultural focus on families and community development and ownership. Dr. Ruth is also a dancer, a choreographer, and part of her training is from the prestigious Alvin Ailey company. She is a producer for several documentary films, and she's a researcher and educator and a cultural activist. And finally, she's an educated teacher and a midwife, and a mother and a foster parent and a grandmother. Welcome. So, we will start with the first 3 panelists. And I feel good standing here. Do you mind if I don't sit? Because these chairs are too high for me, maybe. Okay, so I will start with you, Dr. Michelle. What is a sustainable diversity policy?
Well, I don't know what the official definition of a sustainable diversity policy is, but I have my own definition of what I think a sustainable diversity policy should do. And I think when this question, I'm thinking about cultural institutions primarily, but it can be applied broadly. And I think that a sustainable diversity policy should seek to develop the institutions and develop them in terms of their relevance for the society that we have and not the society that we wished we had. So in terms of what should be sustainable, I'm thinking that one of the challenges that many institutions face today is that they don't keep pace with changes in society. And there is a crisis of relevance amongst many institutions. So I think first and foremost, sustainable diversity policy should inherently seek to evaluate and challenge and to change institutions, give institutions and the people who populate institutions the possibility and the ability to renew the institution intact with changes in society. And that means also reevaluating the mandate of institutions, but also allowing institutions, both the financial and the political ability to go beyond what cultural policy dictates they should do, so that the institutions themselves can define their roles, so that they shouldn't be, the cultural policy, a national cultural policy shouldn't be the ceiling or the limits of the horizon, but only a starting point. So I think that institutions, a sustainable policy will allow institutions to go beyond what the state can imagine for them.
So that would set only the ground, and then they can evolve from that.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And my question also to Niels now about what is now, to start with, how does the cultural policies or the diversity policies, sorry, not cultural policies, diversity policies, how do they look like in the Nordic countries? And also if you can give us a little bit of like an insight about different maybe countries, if you have, like, are there diversity policies in place? How do they look like? Where is it missing?
From my perspective, I would say that diversity policies within the framework of cultural politics are basically invisible. We might have formulated sentences, we might have formulated papers or white papers, but we haven't really turned them into political actions, and we haven't really anchored them inside the framework of the cultural operators. So just to have something this scale, this size, as this project within the auspices of the Norwegian Arts Council is relatively rarely seen on a Nordic level. And one of the reasons why we're seeing it is because the Nordic Council of Ministers had it as one of their 5 central pillars for their program of 2013 to 2020 and approached the Norwegian Arts Council saying, we can't see political action, we can't see projects, we can't see debates, we can't see multiculturality and interculture unfolding on a Nordic level. We need something specific to reactivate it. And if I put on the hat of the researcher, I would say, well, this is probably because of the sensibility on a national level within most of the Nordic countries on how to respond to growing xenophobia, on how to respond to a more increased nationalist perspective taking place and taking over to some extent the public debate in our respective countries. The Swedish Democrats' influence on public discourse in Sweden, the Danish People's Party doing it in Denmark, to a certain extent Fremskrittspartiet, even though they are in government in Norway and so forth. So what we're seeing is a sensibility. Now I'm being really nice, yes. Because you could also say they're simply just being cowards. The structures are being cowards, not daring to respond to the political level, that the political level in Scandinavia does have a responsibility to embrace democracy. And the very minute we kind of reinforce a very certain kind of culture and we eliminate inclusion of other perspectives, I like your term that we are in a crisis of relevance, because I absolutely agree. Then we do not embrace the idea that everybody's got a right to articulate themselves or to experience culture that resonates in their own background or in their own kind of narratives or with their own perspectives. So my answer is that, well, there's a term in Swedish, läpparnas bekännande. And I like that we are kind of confirming each other's lips, but it kind of stays there. And this is God knows which conference I'm at, where we are trying to see how can we actually get further. And I think what the way to get further is to find out how to make policy become reality. And I think that would be something that would be really worth discussing here, basically.
So is this the problem? Like how we have a policy, how to make it real or implementable?
I don't think we have a policy. We don't have a diversity policy within cultural politics in the Nordics as such. We have embryos that could become true politics in both Norway and Sweden. I don't see that. I don't know Iceland and Finland that well, but I don't see that in Iceland and Finland, and definitely not in Denmark.
Definitely not in Denmark. Michelle, you wanted to add something?
I would say we have a lot of ideas, and we have ideals. But there's no accountability. So you have suggestions, there are suggestions, and they're repeated in many policy documents and reports and research. However, many of the suggestions seem to be optional, even though they are explicitly stated as priorities. So either we do it or we don't do it. So if we're going to do it, then there should be some way of looking at accountability and whether the institution. I think it's great when institutions want to hold themselves accountable. I think that has more value than having an outside institution or a government or hold you accountable. You know, publics can hold institutions accountable as well. Publics have a way of engaging with institutions, and usually it only takes to question an omission or an oversight or the absence of something, and then suddenly you have the beginning of a dialogue. I wish that it were that the criticism didn't have to always spark dialogue. That's why I think that it is in the best interest of institutions to be their own self-critics and to take initiative when possible. And in order to do that, you need leadership that has a commitment and that understands the value of pursuing inclusion, because diversity, as it has been said today, diversity already exists in society. So it's really about fomenting the kind of equal opportunities so that diversity becomes more visible and can have a greater impact.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting. I will get back to this point, but first I want to ask Dr. Ruth, because you, when we were talking, you were saying that having a diversity policy is not enough. Yeah. Can you elaborate on that, please?
I can, and I'm a little bit of an anarchist. So before I start, I'd like to thank the people who have made it possible for me to be here. And share about 40 to 50 years of expertise. The Nordic Council of Ministers and Norges Kulturråd. Thank you for inviting me. Critical friends and my son, Alexander. Thank you for
the brilliant dancer of this morning.
Thank you for seeing me and allowing me to be here. And thanking the people. The most important thing is thanking the people of Greenland, where I have lived for 24 years in an indigenous community. And last but not least, and I know this is like, thank you to my family and to my great-grandmothers who were brought over from the continent of Africa and fought to survive during slavery so that I could stand here. That was the ultimate sacrifice. So before I talk about all of those other things and diversity, it's about diversity and inclusion are about dialogue. And that's why this is called Nordic Dialogues, I believe. So the dialogues require two things. One, to speak, and the second, to listen. And it's not enough to speak and not listen. It's not enough to listen. And it's not enough to listen and not respond. to what you've heard. And that's where the challenge comes in. Because working with health and communities and creating perceived quality of life, that is what has been important to me. And me as a person, when we're sitting here, all of you here, we're talking again about dialogue and inclusion and all of this diversity. But what's important here for me is that I'm a mother, a foster mother, a grandmother, a mother-in-law, and a woman of color. But when you guys are looking at us and looking at me, I can't speak for anybody else. You're also looking at and you're thinking, what is she? It's important to you to know that I'm an educated midwife, that I'm a dancer, that I have a doctorate, that I'm the head of the National Acting School, and that I'm registered in Denmark's Blue Book, and I'm an American citizen from Texas. So that is, this is this kind of participation, thank you, is about bringing the dialogue farther up, making sure that it's not just, oh, where are you from? Oh, you're so sweet. Oh, you're so cute. Oh, it's so nice to see you. We really like Black people. I mean, this is not what it's about. That's not the dialogue. The dialogue is farther up. It's about trying to find out what is not working in a respectful manner, and who is being included and who is not being included. And why aren't they being included? The other day I said to you, I think, I said there are two things that is not very interesting to be in the Nordics at this moment. And that is an African man and Middle Eastern woman.
Thank you.
Those things are put a wall up so that our dialogue doesn't become dialogue. You're either talking or you're listening. And it's a question all the time about what you see. So what do you see? You see a woman with a headscarf, or you see a gray-haired woman. There's ageism. There's lots of things in this. And it's really important that the dialogue comes up here, because we are the hope of this whole community. We're the ones who are interested in diversity. So if we're not ready to take the dialogue.
But this thing, you talked about people feeling they don't feel included.
They don't feel included. Middle Eastern women do not feel included in this. They are seen through. Why?
Yes.
Because they have a headcloth on. So it's a question of how we do it. In Greenland, it's an indigenous community where 88% of the people are Greenlandic. And then there's the 12% that is something else. And I'm included in that 12%. But people in an indigenous community can also feel not seen because there is a language, this post-colonial, post-civil rights, post-prejudice, post-homogeneous society thing we have going, makes it so that people don't feel that they have the right to be there. And it's up to us, because this is about policies and things. This is up to us to make sure that they feel they have the right to be there.
Exactly. I will take, thank you. I will take this, the right thing. And I have a question, Michelle and Niels, taking the word of Dr. Ruth about the rights. Is the approach to handle diversity as a legal case, is this the best approach? Because you talked about this is a right thing. This is about rights. And Michelle, you talked about this voluntary approach. So is the approach of having diversity as a legal case, is this the right way to go? What do you think?
There's so many things I would like to say.
Please do.
One is that I think that we have lost the nuances over the last 10, 15 years, in the sense that while on the one hand trying to, as organisms, public organisms, respond to xenophobia, nationalism, and whatever comes up on the agenda, we have at the same time implemented new public management as the steering tool. And those two together has created a very cynical language in terms of the formation of politics. And I really like something that Francois said this morning that resonates very well with me, is the notion of the bigger we. Because I think we are at a space in time where we have to address that we have a resonance and a relevance conflict, a relevance problem that we have to deal with, which is based on diversity, which has to do with the inability to embrace diversity, in the sense that diversity is seen as something that is there, that is just a condition that we always have, and it's not a matter of, it shouldn't be a matter of color, it shouldn't be a matter of belief, it shouldn't be a matter of sex, it shouldn't be a matter of gender, but it has become a matter of color. So I absolutely agree in that description of yours, because it's been politicized. So that bigger we needs to be readdressed, whether diversity as a cause is the right way to do it, or democracy, simply democracy, the simple right, the democratic fundament should be the cause, is up for debate, should be up for debate. My personal point of view is I think democracy is a stronger way of doing it. I think democracy, democratic rights for everyone, democratic responsibilities for everyone is the best way to get around things that marginalize us. I'll stop there for now. There's so much more
thank you. I have like 1 million questions about what you just said. Yes, please.
Sure, I could just add to that. I was thinking along some similar lines of the last comment you made, and I was thinking that in a sense, it has been approached from a legal point of view. This is a democracy. There is a constitution. There's also this thing called the Declaration of Human Rights, Declaration of the Rights of Man. There are certain rights that are defined, and I would say that indirectly, the case for diversity, it has already been made, and is already a part of many legal ideas and perspectives. I think in the Nordic region, where it gets difficult for people and for societies and for individuals is when we consider the notion of belonging, and descent and origin. I think that talking about how people feel a different kind of access to the rights that have already been established as general and universal, in Norway or in Denmark or in another place, is also a good place to start. Why do people feel that they can't access the rights that have already been established? And as we said, if we keep in mind, as has been said today, diversity already exists. It's already there. So what is it that needs to happen in order for us to change the narrative that we have about what diversity is and how it relates to the society that we live in already? It's already here. We have to think beyond the nation state and beyond the regions, and we have to remember that we live on this big ball that's floating, in space, so to speak. We're part of something larger. The human race, Homo sapiens, we're already diverse. It's already there. So it's really about refocusing the conversation on the humanity that we already all have, and talk about what are the challenges to creating equality and equity? What are the challenges that we have? The arts sector don't live in a bubble. They're a part of a larger political environment that we live in. You talked about political discourse. So, the issues that we're trying to address here are issues that are in society and that have real consequences for people's lives. We talk about diversity. It was said earlier that sometimes we talk about diversity because we don't want to talk about power, and we don't want to talk about the power disparity and the imbalance, asymmetrical power relations. But the reason that diversity is important, or to acknowledge diversity's existence is important, is because if the opposite of respecting diversity and respecting common humanity is discrimination, is marginalization, right? So that's why that's why it's important, because if we don't do it, then we are creating an environment where the opposite kinds of ideas and practices can flourish, and that is what we're trying to avoid.
Thank you. Before I move to ask Dr. Ruth, I would like to ask the audience, how many of you here work with an organization that is a policymaker? Who's here coming from an organization? Okay, excellent. And who is here as an NGO or a publicly funded organization? Okay, interesting, thank you. And who is here an artist, an individual artist or cultural activist? Okay, thank you. Thanks. So, Dr. Ruth, if looking at the policies or the work with diversity and inclusion that has been done, if you were a decision maker, what would you change? What's the change that you want to see?
I mean, I'm in a very special situation where I live within an indigenous community as a non-indigenous person, and so I'm very, I have to look at things on two levels at all times. But I think that the important thing is equity in access. Equity in like not opposition, but equality, equity, they're just two different things. And ensuring that there is a possibility and that the policies are not only written down, but they're actually effectuaed. And that has to involve, dialogue with our board of with our Minister of Education. It involves dialogues with what's it called, with education, with arts. It involves dialogues with actors, actresses. Now I'm looking at it from the point of view of where I'm actually working, because I think that it's just a question, or it's not just a question, it is definitely a question of knowing your population and knowing where there are problems and focusing on the problems, correcting them. Because equality is everybody's allowed to come in, but equity is, this is a problem, this is what we have to move, this is what we have to work on. And that is where we often are not.
Okay.
So I don't know if that was an answer.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Niels?
Just to follow up on that, because I think where the ability to look at where we are is happening to some extent in terms of policy making on a city level or on a smaller regional level. I think here in Norway, the example of how Akershus Fylke has been working in terms of trying to allow all the stakeholders to define to what extent the institutions and the networks can become relevant for a larger part of the population is quite amazing, because it's about, basically, it's about changing the way they talk about culture themselves, how they talk about subsidies, how they talk about financial structures, and how they articulate culture as a transversal policy area instead of something in a silo on the far left or the far right or in the back of all the other policies. And the same thing happened in your city, in Malmö, in southern Sweden, where the Malmö Commission really had a long process. They allowed themselves to have a long policy-making process, which was basically an investigation about how do we become relevant to a city in change, to a population in change, to a population that is, by definition, diversity run, in the sense that it is the first minority-majority city in Scandinavia, I believe. And by doing that, they had to rethink the set of norms, the language, the set of value systems that surrounded the formation of politics. And they got into another kind of dialogue, which is quite interesting, because when the policy-making establishments, and we can be very local. Right now we are in a conference by the Norwegian Arts Council. The minute the Norwegian Arts Council, presume, starts having that kind of reflection across the whole country in this case, and trying to define what does that really mean, the conversation shifts, and then you can't no longer just reproduce the logic of yesterday. So it is about framing that larger conversation and really supporting that larger conversation. And basically I'm quoting somebody who said this in one of the earlier sessions, so it's down there on the wish trees, saying the Arts Council should frame open conversations with a larger part of community. I think that's really clever, because that's exactly the kind of dialogue that is lacking in the formation of politics on a national level today.
In a recent project I was working with, I put together a group of policymakers with artists of non-Swedish background, and I was amazed by the response of the politicians, policymakers. They were like, this is the first time ever we sat to the same table with an artist, and that was no effort. Why did not this happen? If they have been working for 20 years. I will connect this to your point. Why do we have pockets of successful success stories that are not connected? How can I phrase it another way? How can we have a policy that is not optional? It uses and reinforces the successes and avoids the failures. How can we have not even a national policy or a Nordic diversity policy, but a European? Like, if you look at the Brussels bubble, it's a scandalous. It's a scandalous. The diversity, the ethnic diversity in the Brussels bubble is the worst manifestation on discrimination. How do we look at building this diversity? Is it a top-down with this right-wing getting stronger and a very white policymaker sitting in Brussels deciding for Europe? Or is it a bottom-up approach? What do you think will happen? How is this possible? Because we have been, today it was said so many times that we have been working with this for 20 years and 30 years, and nothing is happening. What is it that will move the needle every single day towards a diverse and inclusive community, society? Please. Michelle?
Society in general? Are we talking society in general, or are we talking...
We're talking about diversity in arts and culture, but in general, you were the one who connected this to the social
I think lately I have more and more decided that it's very important to have the right leadership in the different institutions, but also at policy level. That leaders are also there to inspire and to set a tone and to promote an agenda and to be visionaries and not just managers. It's about visions. So I really believe that leadership that understands the relevance of diversity and inclusion for the moment, our current moment in society, is very important. And I also think that large institutions that have been privileged in the Nordic regions because of the national cultural policies and their how much I should say their age. They perhaps are seen as more experienced institutions. A lot of the larger institutions have a responsibility to partner with small institutions that have different situations. They have a responsibility to partner with community actors as well. And I think, I know that a lot of people have been talking about collaborative efforts and, you know, co-creation and what's the other word, participatory methods and dialogue, but not on a project basis. I think that there needs to be more long-term commitment to larger institutions with a lot of power collaborating in a more genuine way with smaller institutions or maybe community-based institutions in order to distribute the power perhaps a little more evenly and to I think that larger institutions need to see the value and what they can learn from other actors who perhaps work closer with with different communities. That's how a larger institution can inspire the next generation of cultural workers, artists, etc. And lastly, another issue that I think is very important is the mainstreaming or the lack of mainstreaming of inclusion, diversity and inclusion. I think that there's a lot of project initiatives. We know that projects are very popular, and there's a lot of short-term efforts. But to mainstream diversity and inclusion and prioritize it so that it is not an additional, programming point, but that it really becomes one of the pillars of an institution's mandate, vision, and ambition is extremely important. I have acted as the coordinator for the network of art museums during this for the past year, and I think something that I've heard repeatedly is that my colleagues in the art museums who work with diversity and inclusion, they feel that their own colleagues don't understand what they're doing quite often, and there's a kind of loneliness in the work that they do. So what we decided together, I think it was together, I'm pretty sure we decided together, but what we talked about was that the main audience for diversity and inclusion is not the people you want to see at your museum or the new audience that you want to attract. It's actually your institution. Your institution is your primary audience for diversity and inclusion. You have to diversify, but you have to practice inclusion and have an inclusive institution if you want to attract and be relevant to, a wider range of people. So what we found is that it would be really beneficial if the entire institution could raise their awareness about what role diversity and inclusion, what it means for the institution, that it's a tool, it's not a tool, but it's something that can develop the institution. It's not necessarily about, reaching new audiences. It's about remaking the institution so that it fits the needs of the society that we have today.
Yes, thank you. And I wanted to ask Dr. Ruth about what you just said, but I will just ask the audience, because I felt that this resonated with what Michelle said when she said about the isolation of people who are working with diversity and inclusion. Can you raise your hand if you are one of these people who feel isolated because you are working with diversity in your organization? Okay, thank you. Dr. Ruth, how was you as a leader, as an immigrant who lived in 5 countries in the Nordic and in Turkey and in different countries? How was your leadership? How did it make the school more diverse? Did your leadership affect the who's coming to the school and who's applying?
Well, I think there's several things, because it's a long life, so that's where those things are coming from. But if we just look at like where I am now, the last 20 years, I think one of the things is that you can't. I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. So if you want to have, when you're working with research, you say, okay, this is my question. Our question is, how do we make it diverse? How do we make it inclusive? So then you go and you find all of these information, and from this information, you make a plan about how you are going to actually implement this change you want in community health or something like that. So it doesn't help that you go back and say, well, I found out that that this and this is what's the real problem. And then you go back and you sit down and you talk about something else. So when you can see that you have a society or a community that is 80% this and 20% that, then you have to think about, and you want it to be 100%, then you have to think about the 20%. You don't think about the 80%. Of course you think about that also, but it's the 20% that you use your energy on. And I think that that's one of the things that I find is very, is a problem, is that we're not, we sit, and I'm also a part of this, right? Like, sit and talk about the 88% Greenlandic people who want to be, what's it called? They want to be an actor, an actress. Let's see, that's where I am now. So it doesn't help that everything is in Danish, 12%.
Okay.
So, but it doesn't happen there. That doesn't happen. It's not. But I'm just saying, you have to focus on what you want. If you want children, you have to do children's programs. If you want youth, you have to do youth programs. If you want, you have to focus on what you want.
There was a talk in the previous panel in this room about the need to mirror your society and be relevant, as you said, Michelle. But I have a question. Thank you, Dr. Ruth. I have a question, Niels. Is it possible that because obviously we don't have diversity policies, right? It's like a line or a paragraph here and there. So is it possible that we develop these strong diversity policies on a European or national level or Nordic level without quantifying the problem? We cannot collect data. We have this problem. We cannot collect data about ethnicity. That makes us able to escape the accountability that Michelle talked about before. So if I keep saying I cannot collect data about ethnicity, I have no clue what's the size of the problem. So how can we overcome this when it's illegal to collect data about ethnicity, about race? How can we develop what this audience needs? Is it a smart way to escape the accountability? What is it?
Well, as you said in your presentation of me, I'm a board member of Culture Action Europe. And I am that despite the fact that I'm a great fan of Europe. I think we can learn a lot from each other in different kinds of Europe encounters, European projects, European learning. But I'm less and less convinced that overall transnational solutions are the solutions to our problem. I think actually local is probably more the solutions to our problem, local solutions. And I'm looking outside the culture sector, because I think the cultural sector, there's something about, and this is the only sector I've ever worked in, so in that sense I'm a nerd. But I think we have a problem in the way we talk about quite many things, and we reproduce positions, even though we talk about not wanting to do it, we keep doing it. And just downstairs, we had this poster saying quality versus diversity, which is actually one of the themes, one of the panels that was discussing that before. And François just came down and kind of oversigned the verses and said quality is diversity. And I really like that, because that's the logic of nature science, for instance. They are not talking about excellence of the way we express ourselves, the excellence of yesterday. They're talking about investigating in the diversity of tomorrow. And I think there is something about the way we approach things and the political framework where I can see that happening the most is on the local level. Because local politicians very often have to find solutions to local challenges, solutions that are sustainable, because if they don't, they won't be re-elected. But on a national level or a transnational level, that becomes increasingly difficult because there's so many other things that are being addressed. So I think, to be honest, that we need probably to diversify politics in many levels. And for my own sake, when I grew up, I always looked to the equivalent to the Arts Council in Norway, in Denmark, Kulturstyrelsen, because I knew that they would be, if anything needed to be talked about, they would be the instance that actually would make it happen, because they could frame basically whatever challenged or a challenging dialogue that we wanted to address. Museum practitioners, performing arts people, researchers, you name it. But because of politics on a national level and the sensibility to that and the transitions in society and the lack of national media that we can all kind of relate to, because that doesn't exist either, then we no longer have that strong national narrative in which we are connected. So these resources of yesterday, they don't really exist in the same way anymore. They have been stripped of their resources. They have been limit into being basically interpreters of a very, very limited part of cultural policy on a national level.
But
so I think it's difficult to find that anywhere else than on a local level.
I want to challenge this.
Yeah,
like this.
I might be wrong.
No, but I like what you said, but I want to challenge it, like playing the devil's advocate. Why cannot we, people who believe in diversity and inclusion, why cannot we do the same change of narrative as the climate? They reverse the tide. It's a bottom-up movement. It's they all, from the end of the world to the end of the world, they are speaking the same narrative, and they are forcing the policymakers to change. Why is this? Do you think this is too optimistic? Do you think that people will not have the same interests?
I think people have the same interest, but since it's not articulated politically strongly enough, we need to...
So we go back to the leadership thing again and again. And the knowledge inside the organizations.
And also, I think we have to go back to politics and the political discourse that surrounds us, you know, that we are saturated with. And I think that I like the idea of changing the narrative. I'm advocating that as well. And I often think about why is it difficult to change the narrative? What are people holding on to that makes it difficult? What kind of beliefs and ideas and experiences do people have that make it difficult for them to explore a new narrative? What could someone feel that they would lose, or that would be lost?
Obviously, yeah.
That would be lost if they explored a new narrative. And I think that this notion about belonging, I keep going back to the idea of belonging, has to do with whether a society feels that it's a generous host who has welcomed what they hope will be thankful guests.
And
or
tolerant.
Right. Or whether a society perceives itself as, able to change and grow and become something else without losing something, whether it is experienced as a loss, this new, what we're becoming. And I think that that's something we avoid talking about. It's another uncomfortable conversation that we have to start well, some people have this conversation. We need to have it in a better way, though. This conversation about what is it that people don't want to lose? What does change mean? And when you talk about diversity and inclusion, I think a lot of people think about, something changing from better to worse, or from
Changing,
worse
I think
to
changing.
better. But I think
So
the
it's change
change, the notion of
resistance.
change and what it means,
Exactly.
because we can all see it.
Yeah.
We all know what the population projections look like for the next 20, 30 years across the planet. Every place is changing. Every society is changing. We will have to deal with more diverse societies. So it is important that we try to find a sane and constructive way to talk about that there actually is enough for everyone. There actually is enough to go around.
It's not only enough, it's like it's a business case actually also. But
Yes.
this is also another trap to fall into the business case, diversity as a business case. But now I thank you so much. I would like to invite our next guests. We took a long time. I would like you to welcome with me Endre Lindstøl. And Endre is the principal at Larvik Culture School in Norway. He is a university lecturer at the Norwegian Academy of Music, and he has a background as an educator and a leader of primary, secondary, college, and cultural schools. But also, Endre, you are a member of the musical management of chamber music in Stavanger, together with Arvid Tellefsen and Frida Vevon. And you are concerned with a comprehensive and strengthened education in aesthetic subjects. Endre, you are bringing the perspective of public organizations because you are running a public institution that is publicly funded, right? So I want to start by asking you about your work in Larvik. How do you work? How do you work with diversity?
Yes. And let's change perspective, because
yes.
I'm going to talk about the cultural school, Kulturskolen. And in my school, not my school, our school, sorry about that, it's not mine. We promote knowledge about arts, but we do so much more. We build relations, we are a meeting place, and we try to create a better life for every of my 2,100 students. The youngest one 2 months old, and the oldest one 106 years old. So that's the diversity as well. When we started this work in the municipality, they used the word integration, but we think that's a hard word. And the first thing we did was to do something about that, and we introduced diversity. It's a much more positive term. Everyone is a resource, and we just need to combine the resources. And the first thing we did, I saw that there were so many good initiatives in Larvik, but everyone pulled in different directions. So regarding economy, regarding working hours, we didn't get the result that we needed. So the first thing we did was to establish a common understanding of what we should do. And we needed to establish a tool that we all understood and could work further on with. And that regarding both the municipal administration, the voluntary sector, and the professional actors.
Mm-hmm.
And the main thing about that understanding, that common understanding, that it was had it based in research and reasoning, empiric research. Because if we, and that's the goal here, if we should convince the politicians that this is the right thing to do, we needed to have the good arguments.
Mm-hmm.
So to get there, our main tool was dialogue and communication and persuasion with the politicians. Because my experience, we can't do much if we don't have the politicians to understand what we're doing. In the municipality, that's the way to do it. Because everyone fights for the money. So that's what we did, and we needed a lot of courage, because everyone else, not everyone else, but many others told us that this is not the right way to go. Inside Larvik and outside Larvik. But we have to be, we have to believe in what we had grounded as a mutual understanding. So the next step was to write a plan, kulturplan, a plan about culture. And we used 2 years because it's a complex thing. And you have to listen to all the inhabitants, you have to listen to all the professional actors, you have to listen to the community. Everyone should recognize their voice in that plan. And we produced it, we introduced it, and we published it. And the main thing we did was that the politicians, they said it was okay. So it was entrenched both politically and in the municipal administration. And that's a great tool, because when we want to do something and the politicians said, no, we can't do that, but look at our plan. It's here, and the plan is for 10 years from now. So that's the main tool that we created in Larvik, and has helped us a lot. So that's our ground, that's our base, that's the start. And on that base, we build different tools. Some are good, some are not so good, some are catastrophic. But in that way, we learn and we get better. And we get the acceptance from the whole municipality because we have that plan as a base. So right now, in these 3 years, we're getting closer to where we want to be. But it's quite hard work, and mostly regarding the fundings. Because we have to do this in a proper way, and to do this in a proper way, we need the fundings, and we need the acceptance, and we need the people to know and feel that this is an important thing to do. And with that, we fight with a lot of issues in the municipality. Someone wants a bigger train station, but we want quality for everyone in Larvik. And I feel that they're starting to listen.
Great.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, so in terms of your staff in the school, is it a diverse staff?
The staff is mostly Norwegian, from Eastern Europe, and not the diversity, but some diversity, yes.
Okay. And students?
Students is from everywhere.
Like if you guess by visual.
I think my teachers is also teaching out in different schools where they meet all kinds of nationalities and all kinds of students. So it's hard to measure it in numbers. But we need to be better on that side too. We need to grow those numbers.
But do you collaborate with other partners who have access to a diverse?
Yes, we're trying to make, and we have to make they obligated to cooperate with us, because if we just if it's a project or we have to make it long term and systematic, and then we can see the result. Because everyone knows that the usefulness and the uniqueness of art as a tool, and that's what we're building our base on. And first and foremost, on the basis that art is a special knowledge. It differs from everything else. It's subjective, it's vibrant, it's innovative, and it's immersive, it's beautiful, and it's ugly. It's everything. But also, it's a common language. It's a social unifying. It builds and strengthens the individuals, and it builds relationship. And that's the base. And on that base, we can make commitments, obligated commitments with the whole society in Larvik.
And I think one good base is that art by definition, by design, is diverse.
Yes.
So this is why it should be really diverse. But let me ask you about the funding. You get public funding, right?
We get some public fundings to our culture school, but not the specific fundings for the diversity question. We don't get that.
No. Do you think that there should be like, is it because if you prioritize this, maybe you can allocate the budget, you can find the money in other budget items, but you are not connecting you're not obliged to connect your objectives, diversity objectives, to your funding.
No.
In front of the funders, right? In front of okay. So like, do you know if there is anything like this, Niels? Is there any region or country in the Nordic countries that connects?
Well,
as it's in Britain.
There was in Sweden in 2006 and in Norway 2008. There was two very large national incentives to see if they could promote diversity inside the institution. So there was allocated a lot of money. There was a kind of carrot and whip policy following it. And when they were from political side, they really wanted arts institutions across the different disciplines to engage. And in Norway, it even resulted in a kind of white book with a number of political recommendations that at that time, when Trond Giske was the cultural minister in Norway, was implemented to some extent into the social democratic cultural policy. But we are here.
Exactly.
10 years after, and we are still kind of talking about it. Yeah. Did it work? I'll have to say, well, no, it didn't. Were there a lot of interesting projects? Yes, there was. But I'm not sure articulating it in that sense politically is the right way to go unless you make it permanent, because there is something about permanence. There's something about structure and accepting diversity as a permanent condition in the Nordic countries that needs to be said aloud. And it's only when we say it aloud and we start framing policies around that fact that we can really create that kind of easy access to extra money that can kind of generate, for instance, more students of color to your school. But it needs to be said aloud. We need to have the braveness to talk about it politically, and we don't.
We don't. Actually, I worked with, I'm an engineer, so I work in innovation, and one in 2016, there was 12 publicly funded projects working with the same audience for the same objectives in south of Sweden, in the same region, 12 projects. And this is my tax money and your tax money, and it hurts, because then I know that this project, there was no kind of evaluation. These projects consume the money for salaries, for people who are working with these issues, not achieving any results, no objectives. They are not, like, no evaluation and no learnings. I mean, we can spend the money, but learn something, but we did not. Ruth, you want to say something, because I want to invite Lara, but please go ahead.
Just very quickly,
yes.
that is that we have in our power the ability to look at these things, maybe not count if there's 10 children with green eyes and 6 with blue eyes, but we have the ability to put in tools that can give us, can inspire us to make sure that we're looking the right places.
Yeah, thank you. Endre.
Yeah,
Yes.
but regarding funding, so we need the money to build this offer. So, therefore, our plan was multidisciplinary. So we have to invite health, we have to invite childcare, the schools, to join our, call it battle, and unite to create those fundings who we need to make the good tools.
Can I ask you about the gender percentage in your school among your staff?
Oh, it's about, I don't have the numbers, but I think it's more women, it feels like.
More women.
Yeah.
So does it take extra funding does it take extra funding to work with gender issues? It doesn't, right?
No.
So if diversity and inclusion was the same, we would not be looking for extra funding. It would be something built in our budgets. But I think this is something that there is a knowledge that the organizations does not have. There is a competence to work with these issues that the organizations don't have, and this is not their fault. Again, right? And sorry.
No. Yeah, one more perspective.
Yes,
because
please.
we see one was to get success, we need to build relations with the children, with the youth, and their family. And we just can't start with that. We have to do it again and again to build those relations that really matters. And that takes time, and we need to invest that time. And to invest that time to succeed, we need fundings. So it's a lot of things.
I understand. I want to ask a very quick question to Dr. Ruth before I call Lara. Actually, we have another guest, Samme, but he did not show up, so we used his time. Dr. Ruth, I just want to ask about, do you feel that as a Greenlander, there is a difference in dealing with artists and people from Greenland than dealing with people from Sweden? Do you feel like you are at the margin? Because we talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, but I think that it's very, there's a difference. There is a difference in the way, like if we talk about funding, or if we talk about like institutions, the Nordics are all of plus the 3 areas that have their own self-governments, right, which is the Åland and Faroe Islands and Greenland. But Greenland is is an indigenous community who actually has their own government, and it's very different than, for example, what's happening with the Samis, and it's very different than what happens in Nunavut and Nunavik in Canada. So we actually have our own situation, and it at the same time where we have the possibility of using Nordic funding, for example, for our thing, but it becomes this kind of exotism, is that called? Is that what it's called? Exoticism or whatever it's called? I'm not very good at English right now. Like, can you make a tupilak? Can you make something like this? And so I think that is and like not respecting the fact that artists actually have they have a whole life, and it's not only their indigenousness that actually has that is important to them. So I think that it's definitely a challenge within the Nordics, but within Greenland where it is possible. It's possible to do different things. But one quick thing, I'm sorry, but is that like as a dancer, at one point there was a question about, do Greenlandic kids really want to dance ballet? They can't do that. Shouldn't they be doing mass dance? And that's the type of thing that can be problematic.
Okay, thank you. I'm burning to invite Lara. Lara Sanna is our artist, and please welcome Lara. She is an Italian visual artist based in Sweden. She's part of the network of Nordic artists with multicultural background. Currently, Lara works as an art consultant, exhibition curator, and visual arts teacher. She studied fine arts in Italy and later got a degree. Please count with me. She studied fine arts in Italy, later got a degree in art history from University of Cagliari, and then continued in the same field in University of Iceland. She moved to Sweden in 2001, where she studied again a master in museology and with a specialization on accessibilities and inclusion in arts museum sites. In Italy, she worked in the theater sector, and now she's working with the photographical field, creating art photography projects. And thank you, Lara, for waiting so long. So with all these experiences and excellent education and this level of everything, and being an Italian, one would not think that your work experience in the Nordics was any hard. Is this the story?
It is. It's absolutely, that's it. the story. When I came here today, actually, I started to think about that yesterday, and I thought, am I in the right place? Because actually, I'm not facing the issues that many of you are facing. Since I'm coming from, they mentioned before, West and white place, Europe, and I was actually thinking, yes, I am actually facing the same issues that you are facing. When I came here, it was 2001. I came as a doctor in art history, and I was sure, I'm coming to a different place after having been in Iceland. It can't be so difficult to get a place in the society, and I'm not talking about a job. I'm talking about a place in the society. So getting into a work position, but being accepted for what I am, for what I was bringing in, it was very difficult. For the first issue I faced, it was the bureaucracy. And this is very interesting because we were thinking about money during the whole day, actually. But in the institutions, including the school institution, they are wasting a lot of money in don't bring us. Now it's me that I'm putting in that situation, like we and them. So they don't take us as resource, even if we have a lot of knowledge, even if we can bring in the board a lot of knowledge and a lot of critical thinking and a lot of ideas. We have a resource. We are a resource, a huge resource. So my doctor exam was not convalidated, so I had to sit and learn again what I have learned previously during 11 years of my life in Italy, which means that it was a huge waste of time for me, resource for Sweden. I'm coming from Sweden. I accepted that, so I got my paper again, and yes, it was really hilarious. And then I thought, well, of course, you need to learn a language. Someone here, it has been brought up in the previous panel, the language issue, which is, of course, an issue. No matter where you go, the key to get in the society is the language. Got it. So I've learned the language. I went to the university again. I took my teaching degree, and I was, trying to get in the society with these new keys, plus the key that was a language. It didn't work. So I ended up looking for other strategies. It was, again, study, getting a lot of papers, a lot of new ideas, a lot of new motivation. But at the first time that I have got a clear position, not just a temporary position, it was for 6 years ago. I have lived in Sweden for 20 years. So 14 years of my life I have been studying. Parallelly, I was, of course, working with projects. with temporary positions. So my question is, actually, I found what you said before very interesting. Equality and equity. It's a huge gap between the two things. I can have an equal treatment, like, okay, come and work with us, come and work to us, come and work for us. So yeah, I work for you, sure, and this is what I get. It's a contract, 6 months, and then here we go again. So, and into the dialogue, into that working place, talking about equity, I probably was more capable or more experienced or more well, anyway, of many people that they were running the show. But obviously I was not a part of the group. I was outside the group. So, and I think this is what we were talking about yesterday into our artistic group. How respect is related to the whole thing, actually. Because if I get a place, let's say I get a place as a consultant or as a curator in a museum, and you keep seeing me as someone that doesn't belong to your culture, to your box, to your perception of the world, someone that doesn't have the same code that you have, someone that is somehow different. Sometimes, I have to be honest, the differences or diversities just brought me something positive, because you, as you said before, there is also the narrative of, oh, this is really cool, Italian. But it's really, really art history, but also pizza, mafia, and stuff like that. A lot of prejudices. So you are immediately categorized in a box, which is sometimes good, because you can play that card. But generally, I mean, it makes you in a position that is not the same positions the others have.
I will ask you the same question I asked Dr. Ruth. What would you change? If you were in a power position, what would you change to make your experience not that painful?
That's a very good question. I have been listening here to all this. I have so much to say. We need a policy, this is clear. And we need a policy black and white. And someone brought the word up, like they are obligated. I think it was you. Something really that it's sort of demand, sort of mandatory, a little bit as the gender perspective. Like you must hire in a high position with the evaluation, of course, of the competencies, but with a long-time position. So
like a real job, not as an intern, not like
exactly.
Yeah. And it's I wish we had more time to talk about leadership, but I want to give the audience, I want to give you the chance to ask the panelists. I'm sorry that we don't have too much time. We have less than 10 minutes, but is there any questions in the room? Okay, so you can start asking, because it will take time to. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Odd Bakke. I'm in Helsinki, Finland. I'm an independent cultural professional, also chairperson for Global Point, a non-profit umbrella association that works to improve working conditions of foreign-born art makers in Finland, founded by foreign-born art makers, and we do advocacy and lobbying with the policymakers. So I have been listening whole day, and I came to the conclusion that, of course, we realize that cultural sector with the given picture is quite conservative. There is a will, there is resources, but maybe the change is not happening, or whatever the thing is not happening. And then this thinking brings another point, which is very crucial from my understanding. What is the role of media in it? The mainstream media narrative. I would like to make it very tangible with an example. Based on the research conducted by Ministry, commissioned by OECD, a year, more than 9,000 articles published and circulated by the mainstream big media outlets in Finland. Crime is the most associated word next to immigrants. And it just happens, let's say, almost 2,000 articles. So, which brings a kind of negative perception. And let's think about ourselves as a cultural professional. If we are exposed to this kind of narrative every day, year, more than 2,000, what would be the perception on an individual level? Because we are talking about the mindset of the gatekeepers. Based on our collaboration with Kupore, which is Cultural Research Institute for Finland, the biggest challenge before or not having foreign-born art professionals on a high-up decision-making level in the Finnish cultural institutions is the mindset of the leaders. So I believe that in these gatherings, since we are mentioning and having the title as dialogue, we should somehow start to have a dialogue and bring to the table media representatives, which creates through their narratives good or bad perception about anything and everything we speak here.
Thanks, Ada. Sorry, I'm rushing you because we want to give. There's a gentleman here. I want more than one person to ask. Okay. Oh, we have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Sigil Bukhari. I'm the member of City Council in Brøndby Municipality, Denmark. A short question.
Yes, thank you.
According to the narrative of our honorable panelists, we can see, we heard that we have the policies, we have the dialogue. My question to the panel is, what are the hindrances that we have not obtained yet a sustainable policies to sustainable diversity? Thank you.
Is there a specific person you want to ask? In general, who would like to take to answer the question?
I'd like to.
Yes, please.
Just very quickly, thank you very much. I think we've talked about quality versus diversity, and I have been here only for the last 24 hours, and I have seen quality and diversity. I think that one of the hindrances is what the wonderful lady from Finland said is mindset. It is, what's it called, being able to share the power and to not look as diversity as a problem.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Niels, you want to answer?
I can't always escape, even though I might want to escape, the notion that I once was one of the major gatekeepers, a museum director for a contemporary arts museum. And yesterday, the day before, a few days ago, there was a drawing for the next Euro in football, and I've never seen such a crowd of gubbar, as is the word in Swedish. So many men dressed all in black suits. I think I saw one woman in that room. And everyone was middle-aged, plus 50, deciding the whole framework for one big event that will collect a lot of other men, but also a lot of women and a lot of people of all kinds of races to watch football. And it struck me to what extent people looking like me are really the problem. And in the sense that we are so concerned about being perceived rightly ourselves. One of my main concerns when I was running the museum was to be accepted by my colleagues. not necessarily to be accepted by the people paying the museum. And that still creates quite an anxiety inside me, because I was supported by public money to become accepted by my colleagues, to become accepted as a reproducing institution within a Western framework, within a specific interpretation of what art is all about. So I think that we haven't really talked about the responsibility of the institutions, but I think what if I could dream, I would like to see politicians listen to a very close dialogue that is among people from all kinds of disciplines outside the institutions, people with gatekeeper positions inside the institutions, and people framing the execution of policy, in this case, for instance, the arts councils. Because I think that dialogue is completely missing today. And that dialogue might be the dialogue that could help politicians understand the effect of marginalization, for instance, what will actually happen when they execute marginalizing, nationalist, whatever xenophobic policy. So there is something about the construct of who's talking to who that is really problematic. And we need to get the arts institutions on board, because they are at least 1/3 of the solution.
Thanks for this honest answer, and thanks to our panelists. I appreciate your presence and your input, and thanks to you. You can stay in this room because there will be wrapping up for the whole day on this stage. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fairooz Tamimi, for chairing the panel. Thank you to all the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a long day.
It is.
Yes. Yes.
So we'll just wait till the other rooms are ready.
All right.
Yep. Good.
But I can still ask people in my room if they've had a good day.
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Yep.
So can you raise your hand if